What's up guys, welcome to the channel. Today we've got a little bit more of an informal video. It's World Book Day today, so we're going to look at my top 5 books, my top 10 books actually, so top 5 books for students and top 5 books for instructors. So it's going to be a range of different subjects, but they're all going to relate somehow into practical karate. So we're going to start with my top 5 books for students. So number 1 there is going to be Do Kyohan. So this is Gichin Funakoshi's kind of master text. This is the basis of a lot of what we do. So the main throwing techniques for our syllabus are in here. We study the EI drills from here, which is the kind of very traditional kneeling groundwork. And we use this as a bit of a reference for our kata, although we tend to do them in a more wado or shitoru kind of fashion as opposed to the long stances of Shotokan. So this is a really good book. This is the reprint, so the original one apparently is much better, but I've not read it. But this does still have the throwing techniques and the EI drills in. As you can see, it's quite a chunky book, and it comes with kind of fully photographed demonstrations of all the kata and written through versions. So this is the updated version, but it's got some elements from the old book, like these photos from the original of Funakoshi Sensei doing all the kata and some of the throws. It's just generally a really good for the Shotokan practitioner, or for anyone whose style has Shotokan roots. It's just a really good kind of reference book for all of that. So book 2, we're going to stick with the Shotokan theme. We're going to stick with Funakoshi, and we're going to have Karate Do, My Way of Life. So this is a fairly short autobiography of Funakoshi, written by him shortly before his death. It's a really good kind of history of how Shotokan was conceptualized. But the main thing that I think it's important for students to read it for is to get that impression of kind of pre-war karate. So what karate was like before it was sanitized for the Japanese. You know, the grappling influences that it has in Okinawan Tagumi. The fact that, you know, where we now study a huge quantity of kata very shallowly, previously, you know, the opposite was the norm, and people would do real deep dives into how to apply the kata, and would learn kind of 1, 2, 3 kata over their entire lifetime. So it's a really interesting book, not only about Funakoshi, but also about kind of the changes and the history and the pre-war study of karate. So it's really good for students to read, to get a sense of this was then, this is now, and then for those of us in the practical karate kind of sphere, you know, this is then, this is now, this is what we're doing to fix what was broken. So the next book up is again a style that I've done, but one that I've not done for quite a while, but one that still informs a lot of my practice. And this is actually the book that got me into the practical side of karate, and kind of brought me around to looking at stuff from guys like Ian Abernethy, from Brian Bates, from Andy Allen, those kind of guys. This is a really good book. It's a Goju book, so for Goju guys, really recommend. It's an excellent book, and it's Gavin Mulholland's 4 Shades of Black. So it's a look at the first 4 kata from Goju. Looks at the actual performance of the kata, and then it's got application, it's got pad work for each of them. It discusses the kind of principles that the kata are built on, and it's just generally really good. So obviously, as you can see, I mark a lot of my books for when I want to refresh things. It's really nicely laid out. It's really beautifully kind of illustrated as well. You know, the whole kind of layout of it is really nicely done. It's a really kind of evocative book, and the photos are really high quality as well, and they're large as well. So quite often, you know, if we compare to Kyohan, when we look at the photos, they're quite small. They don't fill much of the page. We've got quite a few in there. We look at 4 shades of black. We've got this subset of the kata across a double page spread with demonstration. Just eight poses for one double page spread. They're really clear photos. They're probably not on the camera, but in person they are. And as I say, it builds up from the solo form of the kata to how to do the bunkai, associated pad work. It's a really good progression. So it's a really good book for Goju guys, obviously, but it's really good for non-Goju guys as well. It's just a really good kind of general look at how to get into the practical side of it, how to build upon the kata, and how to bring some more realism back to the bunkai. And as I say, it's the book that got me into the practical side of karate, moving away from the 3K. So I've got a lot to thank that for. So next up for students, 4th book for students, and the last karate book for students. So this is going to be Karate Jutsu Kumite by Motobu Choki. So this is really good for my students because we do all these drills. Okay, so we have all these in our syllabus. So if you are one of my students, it's good to get a copy just so you can refer back to it. Again, this is a really good, same as Karate Do My Way of Life. It's really good for students so they can get kind of an impression of how karate was pre-war and pre-sanitization by the Japanese. This, unlike Kyohan, does still have the original pictures from the original edition. Again, these are really clear, so we've got one big photo per page with the attendant description underneath. The Japanese is left in, but then we've got an English translation. It's also really good for students to see the kind of Hojo under the supplementary training that was done when karate was still Okinawan, and it's nice to compare that to how we do our supplemental training now with things like focus mitts and heavy bags and speedballs and things, and how that's kind of evolved on from how the Okinawans used to train. Even if you're not one of my students, this is a really good book if you're looking at kind of partner drills and how to make those a little bit more practical. So if you're a student in, for example, a 3K club and the only kind of partner drills you do are the one-step upper rising block to block an oizuki, and you've got a couple of people you want to practice a bit more with, if you want something a little bit more practical that's a bit easier to transition into, this is really good because, again, these are set drills, they're set attacks and defenses that you can learn and that you can then expand out from. So that's Motobu Choki's Karate Jutsu Kumite, really good book. So, last book for students, and this is not a karate book, but it is a book that's massively informed my karate as a learner. And this is The Science of Wrestling and the Art of Jiu-Jitsu. So this is our Liederman's book from 1923, so just after the Victorian period, after that huge kind of jiu-jitsu and Japanese culture and physical culture boom in England at the time. And so this is a really good book. It covers, in the first half, that kind of English style catch wrestling, and then in the second half we have the very kind of traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu techniques. Again, really clear book, so it's really good to see the techniques, nice descriptions of them. So for students who are trying to kind of expand their awareness, it's a really good read. And as with all the others, these are all really good for instructors as well, particularly if you're moving from 3K to transitioning into more practical stuff. These are really good resources to use. Okay, so now we're going to move into the top 5 books for instructors. So as I said, all of the student books, really good for instructors as well. The reason I've chosen them for students is because they have a bit more of a kind of historical perspective on karate, or they focus more on the actual performance of karate, or the actual techniques. So they're a bit better for learners because they're they're more about doing. These are going to be more about kind of teaching. So first book, not actually a book, it's a set of books. I've chosen one of them to show for the purposes of the video, but it's a whole set of books, and they're a really good set of books. And they're the De Lavia's books on kind of strength and conditioning. So they're the De Lavia's anatomy books. These are a really good series of books that cover, obviously this one is stretching. He's got ones that cover lifting and programming and things. The reason they're so good is because they demonstrate exactly the muscles being used at any given point, and they're really nicely illustrated. So we've got photos of the performance of the exercises. We've got anatomical drawings of the parts of the body that are at work. It talks through everything really well, so there's really nice written descriptions. Knowledge of kind of anatomy and physiology is really important for martial arts instructors. It's something that's sometimes forgotten about. We think very much in terms of techniques and kata when we think of our training, and we don't necessarily think as much about kind of the physical preparation side, so the general physical preparation and specific preparation for the martial arts. We'll bang out a couple of laps at the dojo and some star jumps and a stretch, and that's us warmed up. And actually, we can do our students a much greater service if we improve upon our ability to develop that physical development side of it. The De Lavia's books are really accessible for that. So even if you don't have that heavier background in physical training, they're a really accessible way to get into that, particularly if you're not qualified to deliver fitness sessions. So if you're not a gym instructor, you're not a personal trainer, you're not really covered, you're not qualified to deliver fitness sessions, but you can use these to inform what you do as the fitness aspect of your training, and also, as I say, to loan out to students to let them explore more. So next up, and this is very particularly for karate guys and girls, because it's a skill set that we often lack. So really good book for improving your ground fighting skill set is When the Fight Goes to the Ground. It's a really good book by Laurie O'Connell. She's a really good jiu-jitsu instructor, Japanese jiu-jitsu instructor. I'm not sure if she does Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well, I don't know, but this is a really good book. It talks about the very basic, very applicable to self-defense situations groundwork. So it doesn't go super in depth on this is how to work to a kimura from this position and this is this is a basic groundwork technique. This is why you need it. This is how to do it. This is how to apply it in real life. It's really well written. It's really nicely illustrated as well. So loads of pictures there. I'm a big pictures guy personally, so these are a little bit small for me. I'd love some full page spreads, but really nicely illustrated. Goes through everything, piece by piece. It's a really well written book. And if you don't come from a group that has a strong groundwork, so if you come from a group that doesn't have a strong groundwork element, it's a really good book, particularly if you can't then build that element for yourself. So if you don't have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or Japanese Jiu-Jitsu near to you, or wrestling near to you, it's a really good book for you as an instructor to get an awareness of groundwork techniques, and to start building some really simple groundwork techniques into your practice. So on the other end of that kind of grappling spectrum from the groundwork is I've got Sid Hoare's A to Z of Judo. I've actually got a few judo books. I enjoy doing judo. Not very good at it, but I do enjoy it. So I've got a couple of judo books. This, I think, is my favourite as a reference. For the throws, it's the one I find the clearest. It's really well photographed. So some of them have more kind of sketch illustrations and they're not necessarily as clear. So this has much better photographs in. It's got a lot of close-ups, particularly for things like Newaza. But it's got photographs for all the way through. It's got really good written descriptions. Breaks everything down by type of technique. So if we go back to the context page, it breaks down the throws by kind of throw type. So actually, leg techniques, lifting techniques, handing, all that kind of stuff. Really good book, and it goes into illegal judo techniques as well. So techniques that aren't legal in Kodokan Judo, so aren't legal in judo technique, judo competitions. So it goes into things like throws where we grab the legs and lift those, which is really good for us as kind of practical karateka because we're not limited by that rule set. So it's really good to learn throws that aren't allowed in a certain rule set because they still have applicability, even if they're not allowed in a sport. So yeah, Sid Hoare's Z of Judo is a really good reference book for throwing, and also a lot of groundwork. Goes into the groundwork. There's a lot more techniques in it compared to when the fight goes to the ground, but the context is much different. So they're not as contextualized in the Z of Judo as those fewer, simpler techniques are really well contextualized in when the fight goes to the ground. So next book for instructors, another physical preparation book. So this is the NSCA's Guide to Program Design. This is a really good kind of industry standard but introductory book to developing physical fitness and preparation programs, which has a lot of applicability to the martial arts. As I was saying earlier when I was talking about the Delavia's books, it's an area that we often overlook, and it's an area that people are often very ill-informed about. So a lot of martial arts clubs have the same warm-ups that their chief instructors were taught by the Japanese instructors that they had, who received those from instructors in the Japanese army back in 1920. Time has moved on. As someone who delivers a physical sport, you should have an awareness and a knowledge of developing physical preparation programs. You don't need to be a personal trainer, you don't need to be a fitness instructor, but you do have to have a better knowledge of physical preparation than nothing. This is a really good book, spells a lot of things out for you, has loads of things in here like dynamic warm-up exercises. So if you're looking to integrate some of those into your training, because we often see a lot of static stretching in the warm-up for martial arts. It has loads of stuff about periodization. It has stuff broken down, so with practical guidelines. It has performance tests in there. So if you have people who are at a higher level, so if you as an instructor have guys who are training at competing at a national or perhaps even international level, and you don't have a strength and conditioning coach, or they don't have a strength and conditioning coach, you can make yourself aware of at least some general physical capability tests that you can run those guys through, and make sure that their fitness is improving at the same rate that their technical skill is. So yeah, NSCA's Guides to Program Design, really good book, really recommend it. It's just a good kind of textbook for improving your knowledge about physical performance and program design. So continuing the kind of grappling and physical preparation theme that I have gone down with the instructor's book, which I've not done deliberately, These are just the best books that I have found for me as an instructor that I think will help other people. But the last book on our list is the Wrestling Drill Book, published by Human Kinetics, so it's by the same publishers as the NSCA's Guide to Program Design. Really good quality book. So what this is, as it says on the tin, it is just a book packed full of individual wrestling drills. So these range from kind of physical preparation drills that we can integrate into our warm-ups or into our physical training, to kind of very simple technical drills. So, someone's got us grabbed from behind, how can we escape from that? Obviously from a wrestling context, but we can adapt this to a practical context. It's got a load of stuff in it about conditioning, which is really well written and all illustrated. So again, it's going to help you build your skill set for physical preparation. It's got groundwork drills on, again obviously from a wrestling match perspective, but a lot of these, because of the way wrestling is won, focus on getting you back up or getting you to a position on top that you can get back up from quite easily. So these are really easy, really good things to kind of integrate into your practice, that you don't necessarily have to assess or grade. They don't have to form part of your syllabus. They're just really good drills that you can use to develop those skills for ground fighting and for standing grappling, that you can then use to develop those things that you do then grade when we look at grappling. So that's the Wrestling Drill Book, Human Kinetics, really good book. Covers both grappling and physical preparation. Really nicely written, really well illustrated. Definitely worth a look for instructors. So with it being World Book Day, why don't you let us know down in the comments what your best book for students and best book for instructors are,